When it comes to risk management, learning from experience can be an expensive and dangerous approach. For many organizations, the biggest challenge during the pandemic is to navigate the risks and keep people safe while also minimizing any long term negative impact. Guy Russ is the Assistant Vice President, Risk Control with Church Mutual, here to look at risk management during these uncertain times. Thanks so much for being with us this morning.
Absolutely.
Time and again, we hear we are in unprecedented times. How has COVID 19 affected nonprofit organizations like houses of worship and schools in particular?
They've been greatly affected. Really, starting in March, many were closed for either several weeks or months due to stay at home orders in many states. And those organizations needed to figure out how to operate in those conditions. Since many of those organizations are set up to serve others, that's really at the heart of their missions. They found themselves unable to fulfill that core purpose that they have and really unable to connect with donors as well, their sources of income. Once those orders were lifted, then each one had to decide how will they reopen and how will they operate safely in really a new environment, a pandemic environment. Many of them had to almost remake themselves entirely within a very short span of time. In particular, houses of worship needed to find new ways to serve their members without relying so heavily on their in-person interactions. Not surprisingly, many of them put a much stronger focus on recording or streaming their messages so that folks could access those over the internet. Schools, a little bit different than houses of worship, also had a huge change, though, really having to adjust their whole learning environment, all of their learning plans to accommodate either 100% online learning and instruction towards the earlier part of the year, or in this new school year, a hybrid environment where the classrooms are really split and there are some students in person and some learning online. So a huge amount of change for these organizations in a very short period of time.
Well, there are risks associated with remaining open and also risks that come with temporarily closing. What are the added risks of this time many may not be aware of?
Yes, there are a number of risks. If we focus first on reoccupying buildings that may have been idle for a while, and this was more true at the beginning of this year and the beginning of the pandemic, but there are things that many folks may never have heard of or have thought were something that only occurred in the past, like Legionnaire's disease. I mean, even using that term sends shudders down some spines of folks who might remember this as something that was more common in past years for sure, but that's really a disease that comes from stagnant water, whether that's in pipes inside of buildings or in water containers like water heaters. So if buildings are going to be shut down for a period of time, those are risks that can come to play. In buildings that maybe aren't completely shut down but are less occupied than they normally would be, especially if those buildings are in colder climates or climates that can get freezing temperatures, then there's the risk of frozen and burst pipes that can cause water damage. More specifically to the pandemic itself, really any in-person interaction now presents the risk of spreading the virus. And a first concern in that situation, of course, is the health of those that may have attended an event or a service or learning in person. But secondarily, the organization can find themselves at risk of lawsuits, maybe brought by folks that had contracted the virus after an in-person event, and they're trying to connect it back to the organization. Those organizations that have really pivoted to online, of course, there we have cybersecurity risks. And if organizations remain closed to all in-person activity or online activity, then really the mission of those entities is severely threatened and could ultimately take them out of existence. So really what organizations have found is they're now presented with this balancing act of risk, because there's risk of staying closed and there's risk of reopening. So there are a lot of things that folks might not be aware of or might not be thinking of in those situations.
Can imagine what the impact of these risks are on these organizations and their ability to weather the pandemic.
Absolutely. There's lots of different impacts.
So, how are houses of worship, schools, nonprofits responding to a higher risk of, say, things like hacks or cybersecurity threats?
Many are doing a very nice job of realizing that those risks exist, and as such have put in place increased awareness efforts for their staff and faculty, as well as increased training to make sure that those folks understand where those hacks could come from. This is especially true for schools that are providing online instruction now or remote instruction. We should also note that cybersecurity isn't just about hacking. So especially as it relates to youth, whether that's students in schools or youth and children participating in things like Bible studies or youth group activities with houses of worship, sexual abuse online is also a very high concern. Schools and houses of worship in particular are protecting against this risk by ensuring that, number one, a child is never left alone. That's a good practice in person, but also online with an adult. So no child and adult left alone, even in an online situation. And that all faculty and staff, really adults that are in charge of protecting children, have been trained to recognize signs of abuse, and even more importantly, recognizing signs of grooming behaviors that are used by predators that can lead to abuse.
So, have there been technological advancements made to protect buildings and other assets? And what does this say about the severity of threats to physical assets?
Absolutely. This is a bright point, I think, and even in the pandemic, we've seen more emphasis on technology and more advancement in technology. In particular, one of the areas that we deal with a lot is the Internet of Things, or IoT devices, sensors. As an example, we offer our CM Sensor program that bundles water and temperature sensors with our insurance policies so that policyholders can protect themselves from water damage, whether that comes from leaking or frozen and burst pipes. So this is especially helpful in situations where an organization maybe needs to close their building for some period of time, and the sensors really provide them eyes inside of their building so they can still see what's going on there, even though they might not be inside the building on a regular basis. So using those type of devices really helps to bring down the severity of those risks if they do occur, by being able to catch them early and take mitigating actions.
Well, as you said earlier, schools and some churches have been open for lessons and services. What steps should they be taking right now to ensure the safety of all involved?
Another great question. Really, before returning back, we have to think about, is the water safe? So again, that's usually something that people don't worry about too much because the water is flowing through their pipes. But if they have to shut down for any period of time, really making sure that the water is safe to drink again in the building by flushing the pipes and any of those water containers like water heaters that are in the building. As people begin entering their buildings again, then really we like to talk about practicing the 2 Ds of distancing and disinfection. So ensuring people stay 6 feet apart and use masks, that's the distancing D, but then disinfecting surfaces between events and encouraging everyone to wash hands or use hand sanitizer frequently. And we know this is extra work and nobody was looking for extra work, but when we have a situation like this pandemic, we need to make sure that we're taking all of these good measures and following the guidance from our health authorities to make sure we keep everyone safe when they are in person or around each other. And we want to make sure that everyone is aware. We've got a great section on our website around COVID and the pandemic with lots of wonderful safety materials that can take people through everything we talked about here today, as well as lots of other great information for them.
It really is all about predicting the unpredictable, isn't it?
Absolutely. And where you can't predict it, at least having those measures and systems in place that you can mitigate it if something happens that you weren't able to predict.
Guy Russ, thank you so much for taking some time to share your insights with us on Newspoint 360 today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.